The Mokolembembe is a legendary creature said to live in the remote rivers and swamps of the Congo River Basin in Central Africa. It is often described as a large, long-necked, dinosaur-like animal, sometimes compared to a sauropod such as a brontosaurus. Stories of the creature come from local folklore among communities living in the region, where it is sometimes said to inhabit deep river systems and avoid human contact. Early Western interest grew during the colonial period, when explorers and missionaries reported hearing tales of an unknown giant animal in the wilderness. In the 20th century, various expeditions traveled to the region in search of evidence, but none found physical proof such as bones, clear tracks, or a living specimen. Most scientists believe that sightings are likely based on misidentified animals, exaggerated stories, or cultural mythology rather than an unknown surviving dinosaur. Despite the lack of evidence, the Mokolembembe remains one of the most famous cryptids associated with Africa and continues to appear in books, documentaries, and cryptozoology discussions. The thunderbird is a legendary creature found in many indigenous cultures of North America, especially among tribes of the Great Plains and Pacific Northwest. It is usually described as a massive bird capable of creating thunder and lightning with the beating of its wings. In many traditions, the thunderbird is a powerful spiritual being rather than a physical animal. It is often associated with storms, rain, and protection. Some stories say it can carry whales or large animals in its talons, showing just how enormous it is meant to be. Different indigenous nations have their own versions of the thunderbird, but it is commonly seen as a force of nature that helps maintain balance in the world. For example, in some beliefs, it battles underwater serpents or other spirits representing chaos. There is no scientific evidence that a real creature like the thunderbird exists. However, some people believe sightings of very large birds, atmospheric effects, or cultural symbolism may have contributed to the legend. Today, the thunderbird remains an important cultural and spiritual symbol in many indigenous communities and is also widely used in art, storytelling, and modern imagery. I think this refers to the Alkali Lake Monster. The Alkali Lake Monster is a little-known lake monster legend associated with lakes named Alkali Lake, especially in parts of western North America. The most commonly mentioned version comes from local stories in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. Reports describe the creature as a large, serpent-like or fish-like animal living in the lake's murky waters. Sightings are usually vague, often involving unexplained ripples, shadows beneath the surface, or distant shapes moving through the water. Because alkali lakes are often shallow, salty, and difficult to observe clearly, they naturally lend themselves to mystery and misidentification. Unlike more famous cryptids such as the Loch Ness Monster or Champ, the Alkali Lake Monster does not have a long or well-documented history of consistent sightings, detailed descriptions, or major investigations. There are no verified physical remains or scientific studies supporting its existence. Most explanations suggest that reported sightings are likely caused by natural phenomena such as floating debris, water movement, or known wildlife seen under unusual conditions. Today, it remains a minor and obscure part of lake monster folklore rather than a widely recognized cryptid. The Corfu Island creature is a reported cryptid associated with the island of Corfu. Unlike more famous monsters, it does not have a single standardized name or description, and most accounts are scattered, local, or modern retellings rather than a long-established myth. Sightings typically describe a strange, unidentified animal seen near coastal areas or in rural parts of the island. Reports vary widely. Some describe a large, reptile-like or serpentine creature, while others mention an unusual marine animal seen offshore. Because descriptions are inconsistent, It is unclear whether these stories refer to one creature or several unrelated sightings. There is no verified historical record of a well-known traditional monster from Corfu comparable to classic European lake or sea monsters. Many of the modern reports may be influenced by misidentified marine animals, drifting debris, or local storytelling that evolved over time. As of now, there is no scientific evidence supporting the existence of a unique unknown creature on the island, and it is generally considered a minor or modern cryptid legend, rather than an established part of Greek mythology. The Mongolian deathworm is a cryptid said to inhabit the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It is usually described as a large, red, worm-like creature that lives underground, with some versions claiming it can spit acid or emit electric shocks to kill prey. Local legends refer to it as the Algoi Korkoi, and stories about it have circulated for generations among nomadic communities in the region. Reports often place it in remote desert areas where sand dunes and extreme conditions make visibility and verification difficult. In the 20th century, several expeditions attempted to find evidence of the creature, but none produced physical proof such as remains, specimens, or clear biological traces. Descriptions from alleged eyewitnesses are inconsistent, ranging from a simple large worm to a more dangerous, supernatural predator. Most scientists and researchers consider the Mongolian deathworm to be a myth or misunderstanding of real desert animals, such as snakes or other burrowing creatures, possibly combined with folklore and exaggeration. Despite the lack of evidence, it remains one of the most famous cryptids in Central Asian folklore and continues to appear in books, documentaries, and cryptozoology discussions. The lechuza is a creature from Mexican and southwestern United States folklore, often described as a shape-shifting witch that can transform into a large owl-like bird. The word lechuza literally means owl in Spanish, but in legend it refers specifically to a supernatural being rather than a normal animal. Stories usually describe the lechuza as a woman who made a deal with dark forces and gained the ability to turn into a giant owl at night. In some versions, she uses whistles or cries that mimic human voices to lure people outside or scare travelers on lonely roads. In rural folklore, especially in parts of Mexico and the southwestern United States, the lechuza is often used as a cautionary tale to keep people, especially children, from wandering out at night. There is no scientific evidence that such a creature exists. Most interpretations suggest the legend comes from a mix of owl behavior, since real owls can be eerie at night, superstition, and traditional storytelling about witches and shape-shifting spirits. Today, the lechuza remains a well-known figure in regional folklore and continues to appear in horror stories, media, and cultural traditions. The takalosh, also spelled takalash, is a small, mischievous, and often dangerous creature from southern African folklore. It is especially well known in traditions from South Africa, where stories about it are widespread in rural and urban communities. It is usually described as a short, goblin-like being with a wrinkled face, sometimes partly invisible or able to make itself unseen. In many versions of the legend, the takalosh is summoned or controlled by a witch or sorcerer to harm enemies, steal food, or cause illness and bad luck. One of its most famous traits is that it is said to be able to enter homes at night and attack people while they sleep. Because of this, some traditional beliefs include practices like raising beds on bricks to keep it away. There is no scientific evidence that the takalosh exists. Most explanations link the stories to folklore, fear of the dark, sleep paralysis experiences, and cultural storytelling traditions that explain misfortune or illness. Despite that, the takalosh remains a strong figure in southern African mythology and is still widely referenced in stories, media, and popular culture. The yowie is a legendary creature from Australian folklore, often described as a large, hairy, ape-like being that walks on two legs. It is commonly compared to Bigfoot or Sasquatch, with reports placing it in remote bushland and mountainous regions across Australia. Stories of the yowie come from indigenous Australian oral traditions that long predate modern sightings. In these traditions, similar beings are sometimes described as spirit-like or wild humanoid creatures associated with the wilderness. Modern interest in the yowie increased in the 19th and 20th centuries, when bushwalkers and campers reported seeing strange figures, large footprints, or hearing unusual calls in the forest. These accounts vary widely in detail and reliability. There is no scientific evidence that the yowie exists. Most explanations suggest sightings are misidentified animals such as bears are not native to Australia, but large kangaroos, wild pigs, or other wildlife seen under poor lighting, along with the influence of folklore and expectation. Today, the yowie remains a popular part of Australian cryptid lore and continues to appear in books, documentaries, and cultural storytelling. The Loveland frog, or Loveland frogman, is a cryptid reported near Loveland. It is usually described as a humanoid frog or frog-like creature standing upright, sometimes about the size of a small person. The most famous reports come from the 1970s, when several people claimed to see a strange amphibian-like figure near Rhodes and the Little Miami River. One story describes a police officer encountering a frog-like being holding a wand or stick, though later accounts suggest it may have been a misidentified animal. Descriptions of the creature vary. Some say it looks like a large, bipedal frog with leathery skin, while others think earlier sightings were likely escaped exotic pets, large iguanas, or other known animals seen in unusual conditions. There is no scientific evidence that the Loveland frog exists. Most researchers consider it a local urban legend that grew from a mix of eyewitness confusion, storytelling, and media attention. Despite that, it remains a well-known part of Ohio folklore and has become a popular regional cryptid in American pop culture. The orang pendek is a cryptid reported from the dense rainforests of Sumatra. Its name means short person in Indonesian, and it is usually described as a small, upright, human-like creature covered in short hair. Witnesses often report it standing about the height of a child or a short adult, with strong arms, broad shoulders, and a quick, agile way of moving through the forest. Some accounts say it leaves footprints similar to a human's but smaller and more primitive-looking. Stories of the orang pendek come from local Sumatran communities, where it is sometimes considered a shy forest-dwelling being that avoids humans. In modern times, Western explorers and cryptozoologists have also reported sightings, particularly in remote jungle areas. Despite occasional expeditions and claimed footprints or hair samples, there is no confirmed scientific evidence that the orang pendek exists. Some researchers suggest sightings could be misidentified animals such as sun bears, which are native to the region and can sometimes stand upright, or other known wildlife seen under poor conditions. Even without proof, the orang pendek remains one of the more frequently discussed cryptids in Southeast Asian folklore and cryptozoology. The Kongamato is a legendary creature from the swampy river regions of Central and Southern Africa, especially stories originating in areas such as Zambia and nearby regions. It is usually described as a large, winged reptile-like creature with a long beak and leathery wings, often compared to a prehistoric pterosaur. Witnesses sometimes say it has a reddish or dark body and flies low over rivers or swamps, occasionally capsizing small boats or frightening travelers. The name Kongamato roughly translates in some local languages to something like breaker of boats or overturner of canoes, reflecting its reputation in folklore as a dangerous river creature. Stories about it were reported in the early 20th century, when explorers and colonial officials recorded local accounts of a flying reptile-like animal in remote wetlands. However, no physical evidence, fossils, or verified sightings have ever confirmed its existence. Most scientists and researchers believe the Congamato legend may come from misidentified large birds, such as storks or herons, or from cultural memory of extinct prehistoric animals combined with folklore. Today, the Congamato remains a lesser-known but intriguing cryptid in African folklore and cryptozoology discussions. The Wendigo is a creature from Algonquian-speaking indigenous folklore in North America, especially among cultures in and around the northern forests of what is now Canada and the United States. In traditional stories, the Wendigo is not just a physical monster, but also a spiritual being associated with winter, starvation, and greed. It is often described as a gaunt, emaciated humanoid with sunken eyes, ashen or decayed skin, and an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In some versions, it can grow larger the more it consumes, never being satisfied. The concept of the Wendigo is also used as a moral warning in many indigenous traditions, representing the dangers of cannibalism, selfishness, and loss of humanity during times of extreme hardship. It is closely tied to harsh winter survival conditions in northern forests of regions like Canada. In modern pop culture, the Wendigo has been adapted into horror stories and games, often portrayed as a forest-dwelling monster. However, these versions are often very different from the original cultural and spiritual meanings. There is no scientific evidence that the Wendigo is a physical creature. In indigenous belief systems, it is better understood as a spiritual warning and cultural symbol rather than a biological animal. The Almas, sometimes spelled Almasty, is a cryptid reported from remote mountainous regions of Central Asia and the Caucasus. It is usually described as a large, human-like creature covered in dark or reddish hair, similar in general idea to Bigfoot or the Yeti. Most stories place the creature in isolated wilderness areas of regions such as Mongolia, Russia, and nearby mountain ranges. Witnesses often describe it as walking upright, being very strong, and avoiding human contact. Accounts of the Almas go back several centuries, appearing in local folklore and occasional reports from travelers and soldiers. During the 20th century, researchers and cryptozoologists investigated sightings, sometimes collecting alleged footprints or hair samples, but none were scientifically verified as belonging to an unknown species. Most scientists believe reported sightings are likely misidentifications of known animals such as bears, combined with folklore, fear, and storytelling traditions in remote regions. Despite the lack of evidence, the Almas remains one of the better-known wild man legends of Central Asia and is often grouped with other cryptids like Bigfoot and the Yeti. The Yumebazu is a creature from Japanese folklore said to appear at sea, usually during calm or suddenly stormy nights. It is often described as a massive, dark, humanoid figure rising from the ocean, with a smooth, featureless head like a monk's shaved skull. This is where the name comes from, since Yumebazu roughly means sea monk. In traditional stories, sailors in Japan would encounter the Yumebazu when traveling offshore. It might appear suddenly from the water and capsize ships or demand barrels from sailors, sometimes filling them with water to sink the vessel. The behavior of the Yumebazu varies widely depending on the story. In some versions, it is purely destructive and terrifying. In others, it can be avoided or even tricked if sailors remain calm and follow specific instructions, such as giving it a bottomless barrel so it cannot finish drinking. Most researchers believe the legend may have been inspired by sightings of large waves, whirlpools, or marine animals seen in poor visibility conditions, especially during storms at sea. There is no scientific evidence that the Yumibazu is a real creature. Today, it remains a well-known figure in Japanese folklore and appears frequently in art, anime, and storytelling. The Dobarchu is a creature from Irish folklore, described as a large, dangerous water beast said to inhabit lakes and rivers. In stories from Ireland, it is often depicted as part dog and part fish or otter, with sleek fur and a powerful body built for swimming. Some versions describe it as extremely aggressive, capable of attacking livestock or even people who come too close to the water. One of the most famous legends involves a woman who was killed by a Dobharchu, after which her husband supposedly hunted and killed the creature. This story is sometimes linked to an old gravestone in County Leitrim that features carvings said to represent the beast and its defeat. Like many cryptids, there is no scientific evidence that the Dobharchu exists. Most explanations suggest it may have been inspired by sightings of large otters or other aquatic animals, combined with folklore and fear of deep or dangerous waters. Today, it remains a well-known figure in Irish myth and is often discussed alongside other legendary creatures from Celtic folklore. The Tsuchinoko is a creature from Japanese folklore, often described as a snake-like animal with an unusually wide or swollen middle section and a very short tail and head. In stories from Japan, it is said to live in mountains and rural areas, hiding in grass or under rocks. Some accounts claim it can jump short distances, roll like a wheel, or even produce a sound like a chirp or human voice. The Tsuchinoko has been part of regional folklore for a long time, but it became especially popular in modern culture during the late 20th century, when reports of sightings increased and some towns even offered rewards for capturing one. Despite many alleged sightings, there is no scientific evidence that the Tsuchinoko exists. Most explanations suggest it may come from misidentified snakes, especially those that appear bloated after eating, or from exaggerated storytelling. Today, it remains a well-known Japanese cryptid and a popular figure in games, anime, and folklore tourism.
And his name is John C.